Hello everyone, my name is Olivia Lawson. Life in our quaint suburban town had always been simple and predictable until James walked into my life. He was a charming entrepreneur, 6 years my senior, whose presence alone was enough to stir the gentle currents of my routine existence. Our relationship unfolded swiftly, like a well-loved novel, each chapter more thrilling than the last. But there was a twist. James had a teenage daughter, Mia, from a previous marriage, a detail he kept hidden until the love between us had deepened. When James finally confessed, I was overwhelmed by a storm of emotions. Shock, confusion, and a hesitant understanding swirled within me. The idea of stepping into the role of a stepmother was daunting, yet James's kindness and our growing bond convinced me to embrace the challenge. Our wedding day was a blend of joy and melancholy. As I looked around, searching for Mia's face in the crowd, I felt the absence of her presence like a weight in my chest. Her hostility was evident. She had been distant, uncooperative, and made no effort to mask her disapproval. Despite this, I clung to the hope that time would bridge the chasm between us. "Olivia, I know this isn't ideal," James had said softly, his hand resting on mine during our vows. "But I believe we can make this work." I smiled, though a nagging feeling tugged at my gut, whispering that our fairy tale might be more complex than I had imagined. James's eyes, filled with love and reassurance, masked the storm brewing beneath the surface. The road ahead, I realized, was not paved with the ease I had anticipated. 2 years into our marriage, our world shattered. James was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and suddenly, our serene life transformed into a whirlwind of hospital visits and sleepless nights. The once simple rhythm of our days was replaced by the relentless march of medical appointments and the pall of impending grief. It was during this turbulent period that Mia reappeared, not as a caring daughter but as a determined figure, keen on staking her claim to her father's legacy. Her sudden appearance was a jolt, one that intensified the emotional upheaval already consuming me. One dreary afternoon, as I sat by James's bedside, holding his frail hand, the door swung open with a force that belied Mia's otherwise reserved demeanor. She stormed into the room, her eyes sharp and calculating. "I'm moving in," she announced, her voice cold and authoritative. "Dad needs his real daughter now, not some replacement." I could feel the sting of her words, a sharp contrast to the tenderness of James's grip on my hand. I wanted to respond, to defend myself, but James's tired gaze and the fragility of his condition made me swallow my retort. I forced a smile, though it felt more like a grimace. "Mia, this is a difficult time for all of us," I said softly. "Let's try to be supportive of each other." But Mia's support seemed more about securing her inheritance than about offering comfort. As days turned into weeks, her intentions became glaringly apparent. Her presence was a constant reminder of her determination to claim what she believed was rightfully hers, leaving me grappling with the growing tension between us. The situation took a cruel turn when Mia dropped another bombshell. One morning, she barged into the house with a bundle in her arms, an infant wrapped in a pink blanket. Without so much as a word, she thrust the baby into my arms and announced, "I'm off on a vacation. Lily needs you more than I do." Stunned and speechless, I cradled the tiny form. Feeling a mixture of panic and responsibility fled through me. The baby's wide eyes and tiny fingers grasping at my clothes were a sharp contrast to the grim reality of James's deteriorating health. I had never imagined myself as a mother, let alone a step-grandmother. But as I looked into Lily's innocent face, I felt a pang of fierce protectiveness. Days turned into weeks, and the challenges of caring for Lily became a central part of my new reality. Her giggles and coos, despite the grim backdrop of our lives, brought an unexpected light into our home. As I tended to her needs, I realized I had become more than just a temporary caregiver. I was the primary guardian of this fragile new life, her sole source of comfort, while her mother remained an elusive figure. In the midst of this chaos, I began to reflect on the irony of my situation. I, who had once been hesitant about having children, was now raising my step-granddaughter while her biological mother was nowhere to be found. This new responsibility, though daunting, provided me with a sense of purpose and strength that helped me navigate the relentless pain of James's illness. One evening, as I prepared a bottle for Lily, James looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. "You've been incredible, Olivia," he said, his voice a faint whisper. "I wish things could have been different. I'm so sorry for all this." I squeezed his hand gently, my heart aching for the man who had brought so much light into my life. "We'll get through this, James, for Lily's sake." James nodded, his eyes closing with a weary smile. The days ahead were uncertain, filled with the shadow of impending loss and the weight of Mia's manipulations. But with Lily in my arms, I found a sense of resolve that kept me moving forward, even when the path ahead seemed shrouded in darkness. The days that followed James's diagnosis were a blur of hospital visits, fragmented sleep, and an endless stream of anxious thoughts. Each day seemed to bleed into the next, punctuated only by the rhythmic beeping of medical machines and the solemn faces of doctors. I found myself living in a state of perpetual worry, as if we were caught in a maelstrom from which there was no escape. One particularly gray afternoon, as I sat in the waiting room of the oncology ward, my thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of Mia. Her entrance was as jarring as a clap of thunder in a quiet room. She strode in, her face set in a mask of false concern, and approached me with a forced smile. "Olivia," she said, her tone dripping with insincerity. "I didn't expect to find you here. How's Dad?" Her presence was like a shadow cast over what little light remained in our world. I looked up, trying to mask the exhaustion I felt. "He's hanging in there. It's been tough." Mia's eyes flicked around the room, taking in the sterile surroundings with a calculated gaze. "I've been thinking, since Dad needs to focus on his treatment, I'm going to move in with you. I'm sure you could use the help." The suggestion hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. I wanted to argue, to voice the hurt and frustration Mia's words sparked, but I was too weary to fight. Instead, I nodded wearily, accepting that any semblance of peace was now a distant memory. The days grew darker as James's condition deteriorated. Each visit to the hospital was a reminder of the cruel twist of fate that had befallen us. Mia's presence in our home became a constant reminder of the conflict that simmered beneath the surface. She was never genuinely involved in caring for James. Her visits seemed more like strategic maneuvers to position herself for the inevitable. One evening, after a particularly draining day, I was at home preparing dinner when Mia cornered me in the kitchen. Her demeanor was all business, her eyes sharp with an edge that made my skin crawl. "I've been thinking about the will," she began, her voice low. "James is clearly not going to make it. I need to know what's going to happen with his assets. I have a right to be informed." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. James's affairs are in order. Everything is being handled according to his wishes. He's asked that we focus on his health, not on the inheritance. Mia's eyes narrowed. "Well, I hope you're not planning to make any changes behind my back. I have a stake in this too, you know." Her words were a stark reminder of the underlying tension between us. "I'm not making any decisions," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed anger. "James's wishes are being respected. If you have concerns, you should speak to his lawyer." Mia's expression turned calculating. "Maybe I will, but don't think I'm going to be pushed aside. I have rights, Olivia." With that, she turned on her heel and left, leaving me alone with the clattering of dishes and the sinking feeling of being trapped in a fight I never wanted. As I stared at the empty kitchen, I realized that Mia's presence was not just a strain on our lives. It was a stark reminder of the power struggles that were beginning to unfold. Amid this chaos, the situation took another unexpected turn. Mia, in an act of sheer audacity, returned one day with her infant daughter, Lily. Without a word of explanation, she handed the baby to me and declared that she was going on a much-needed vacation. The suddenness of it all left me reeling, holding this tiny, helpless creature in my arms while her mother walked away, seemingly oblivious to the upheaval she was leaving behind. I looked down at Lily, her small face framed by a mop of dark hair. Her wide eyes blinked up at me with innocent curiosity. I felt a pang of both sadness and protectiveness. Here was this innocent child, completely dependent on me, while her own mother was nowhere to be found. As days turned into weeks, my role shifted from that of a reluctant stepmother to a full-time caregiver. The challenges were immense. Lily's needs were constant, from feeding and changing to comforting her through her cries. Despite my initial reservations, I found myself growing attached to this little girl, her laughter and warmth providing a flicker of light amidst the gloom of James's illness. One evening, as I rocked Lily to sleep, I reflected on the strange turn my life had taken. I had never envisioned myself in this role, caring for a child while grappling with the decline of my husband. Yet, Lily's presence became a lifeline, giving me a sense of purpose and strength that I desperately needed. I found myself often talking to Lily, sharing my thoughts and fears as if she were an understanding confidant. "You know, Lily," I murmured one night as she lay snuggled in my arms, "your mother left you in my care, and it's not what I expected. But I promise to take good care of you. We'll get through this together." In the quiet moments with Lily, I began to realize that while I had been thrust into this role unexpectedly, I was more capable than I had given myself credit for. The challenges were overwhelming, but they were also revealing my own strength and resilience. And as I looked at Lily's peaceful face, I knew that despite everything, I had found something profoundly meaningful in the midst of our turmoil. Mia's abrupt departure left me grappling with the reality of my new role as Lily's caregiver. Each day was a juggling act of tending to a frail, terminally ill husband while providing round-the-clock care for an infant who needed everything from bottles to burps. My exhaustion was palpable, but in the midst of the chaos, Lily's presence provided a strange comfort. I often found myself lost in thought as I rocked Lily to sleep, her tiny body nestled against me. The quiet moments between her sleepy sighs offered a rare respite from the constant stress. Despite my deepening bond with Lily, the void left by Mia's absence was ever present, like a shadow hovering at the edge of my vision. One evening, as I prepared Lily's bottle in the kitchen, the phone rang. It was the nursing home where James's health had declined further, urging me to come by for what they described as an important update. My heart raced with a mix of dread and resignation. I hastily left Lily with a neighbor, her tiny figure oblivious to the storm brewing in our lives. At the nursing home, I found myself seated across from Dr. Peterson, the lead physician overseeing James's care. His face was etched with concern, and he cleared his throat before speaking. "Olivia, I'm afraid we need to discuss James's condition. It's become critical, and I want to ensure you understand the gravity of the situation." My breath caught in my throat. "What are you saying, Dr. Peterson?" He leaned forward, his gaze steady. "James's cancer has progressed beyond what we can manage with current treatments. He's likely in his final days. I wanted to make sure you were prepared for the inevitable." The room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing down with the weight of his words. I nodded, trying to process the information. "Thank you for being honest. I'll make sure he's as comfortable as possible." The drive back to the house was a blur. My mind was consumed with thoughts of James, of the pain and helplessness I felt, and of the overwhelming responsibilities I had assumed. When I arrived home, I found Mia waiting for me, her demeanor a mix of anxiousness and determination. "Olivia," she said, her voice tinged with a strained note of concern, "I need to talk to you about something important." Her sudden appearance was disconcerting. "What is it, Maya?" She took a deep breath, her eyes darting nervously. "I've been thinking. Since James's condition is worsening, I should be involved in making decisions about his care and the estate. It's only fair." I struggled to maintain my composure, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "You've been absent for months, Mia. Now you want to step in and take control." Mia's eyes narrowed. "This isn't about control. This is about ensuring that everything is handled properly. "You can't do this alone, and I'm his daughter." Her words stung, but I was too drained to argue. "Fine," I said tersely. "You can be involved. But right now, James needs peace, not more conflict." Mia's expression softened slightly, but her eyes remained calculating. "I just want to make sure everything's fair. I'm sure you understand." As I turned away, my mind raced with the realization that Mia's sudden interest in her father's affairs was driven more by personal gain than genuine concern. It was as though she saw this crisis as an opportunity rather than a tragedy. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotional turmoil. James's health continued to decline, and each visit to his bedside was a stark reminder of the frailty of life. I found myself increasingly overwhelmed, struggling to balance the demands of caregiving with the emotional strain of watching my husband slip away. One afternoon, while tending to Lily, I received a visit from Ryan, Lily's father. His presence was a surprising relief amid the tension. He looked weary but determined, and his eyes held a mixture of gratitude and concern. "Olivia," he said, shaking my hand warmly, "I've heard about what's been happening. I wanted to thank you for taking care of Lily. I'm sorry for all the trouble this has caused." I gestured for him to sit. "It's been difficult, but she's a bright spot in the midst of everything." "How are you holding up?" Ryan sighed, his shoulders slumping. "It's been rough. I never expected to be in this position. Mia's actions have made everything more complicated. I just want to make sure Lily is safe and well cared for." I nodded, understanding his concerns. "I know what you mean. Mia has been more focused on her inheritance than on her responsibilities as a mother. But I promise you, Lily is in good hands." Ryan's expression softened, and he smiled faintly. "I appreciate that. I'm trying to sort things out with Mia, but she's been evasive. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know." Our conversation provided a brief respite from the constant stress. Ryan's sincerity and concern were a balm to my frayed nerves. Yet, as I looked at Lily nestled in her father's arms, I felt a pang of sorrow for the family torn apart by conflict and illness. As the days grew darker, I found strength in the small moments of connection and understanding. Each day was a struggle, but it was also a journey of unexpected revelations. In caring for Lily and supporting James through his final days, I discovered an inner resilience I never knew I possessed. The battle with Mia over the estate and her role in James's care was far from over, but in the midst of the chaos, I had found a sense of purpose and clarity. The challenges were immense, but they had forged me into a more assertive and determined individual. And as I watched over Lily, I knew that despite the trials, there was a path forward. One that would lead to a new chapter in my life, shaped by love, resilience, and the strength to confront whatever lay ahead. James's passing was a wound that cut through my life with a jagged edge, leaving behind a void that no amount of time could completely fill. The house, once bustling with the frenetic energy of daily life, now felt eerily quiet, as if mourning the loss of its occupant. I was left to navigate the remnants of our life together while contending with the increasingly combative presence of Mia. A week after James's funeral, Mia returned to the house, her demeanor now a cocktail of determination and barely concealed hostility. Her reappearance was like a storm cloud darkening an already turbulent sky. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping a cup of lukewarm coffee, when she marched in with an air of entitlement. "Olivia," she said, her voice clipped and demanding, "I need to discuss the estate. It's time to settle things." I glanced up, trying to remain calm despite the rising tide of frustration. "Mia, I've already told you that everything is being handled according to James's wishes. We're not in a position to make any sudden decisions." She slammed a folder onto the table, its contents spilling out like a spilled bag of secrets. "That's not good enough. I have rights, and I intend to see them honored. I'm here to ensure that my father's legacy isn't taken from me." Her words stung, a bitter reminder of the ongoing battle. I stood up, trying to steady my voice. James's will was clear. He wanted his assets to be distributed according to the legal documents he prepared. I'm not trying to take anything from you, but I need you to respect his wishes and the process." Mia's eyes flashed with anger. "Respect? You've had all the respect. You've had all the time. But now, it's my turn to make sure that everything is fair." I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my emotions in check. Fair? What about the fairness of abandoning your responsibilities and only showing up now? You can't just waltz in and demand what you want. Her face hardened, but before she could respond, the sound of Laylee's cry echoed through the house. I excused myself, leaving Mia fuming in the kitchen. As I attended to Lily's needs, I found solace in the simple act of comforting her. In her small, trusting gaze, I found the strength to continue fighting for what was right. Later that week, the tension between Mia and me reached a boiling point. She insisted on having access to every document, every detail of James's estate, claiming that she needed to understand her position. I felt a creeping sense of violation, as though my life was being invaded by someone whose only interest was in the material benefits of our shared history. One afternoon, as I reviewed some papers in the study, Mia burst in, her face flushed with frustration. "Why aren't you cooperating? I'm only trying to ensure that everything is handled correctly." I looked up from the papers, struggling to remain composed. "Mia, I've already given you everything you're entitled to. The legal process is underway. You can't keep demanding more just because you're unhappy with the outcome." Her frustration boiled over. "You don't understand what it's like to be in my position. You think you can just push me around and take what you want." Her accusation was a harsh reminder of the growing divide between us. I felt a pang of guilt, but also a deep sense of injustice. "I'm not pushing you around. I'm trying to honor James's wishes and protect Lily's future. I'm not going to let you undermine that." Mia's anger turned to desperation. "I'm not trying to undermine anything. I just want what's fair, and right now, it feels like I'm being left out." The argument left me emotionally drained, but it also clarified my resolve. I had been too passive for too long, trying to avoid conflict while letting Mia's demands escalate. It was time to draw a line in the sand and stand firm in my convictions. In the midst of this, Ryan's presence became a reassuring constant. His visits, though brief, provided a sense of normalcy and understanding. One afternoon, as we sat together on the porch, he voiced his concerns about the ongoing conflict. "Olivia," he said, his voice gentle but earnest, "I've been thinking about everything that's happening. It's clear that Mia's intentions are more about the estate than about Lily's well-being." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and weariness. I've come to the same conclusion. It's exhausting dealing with her constant demands, especially when I'm trying to focus on what's best for Lily. Ryan's expression softened with empathy. "I know it's hard, but you're doing the right thing by standing up for what's fair, and I'm here to support you in any way I can." His words were a balm to my frayed nerves, providing a small measure of comfort in the midst of the storm. With his support and my growing resolve, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I had to navigate this difficult situation not just for my sake, but for Lily's future as well. The battle with Mia was far from over, but I was no longer the passive bystander in the struggle. The experience had forged a new strength within me, one that would carry me through the ongoing conflict and help me build a future that honored both James's memory and Lily's needs. In the midst of the chaos, I found a sense of empowerment and purpose. As I held Lily close, her tiny hand grasping my finger, I knew that despite the challenges, I was ready to face whatever came next. The path forward would be fraught with obstacles, but with newfound resolve and support, I was determined to ensure that justice prevailed and that Lily's future remained bright. The courtroom was a stark contrast to the homey confines of the house where I had spent so many tense months. Here, the air was cold and sterile, charged with a formality that felt almost foreign. As I sat in the gallery, clutching Lily, I couldn't shake the sense of impending climax. This was the moment when everything would either come together or fall apart. The case had reached its zenith. Mia had stubbornly contested every aspect of the estate, her demands escalating as she fought for what she believed was her due. But the truth, buried under layers of deceit and manipulation, was about to be exposed. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs as the judge entered, his presence commanding instant silence. I took a deep breath, my thoughts drifting to the days and nights of sleepless worry that had brought me to this point. Despite the pressure, I was determined to see it through for Lily's sake. Mia was seated across the room, her posture rigid with defiance. She had a lawyer by her side, a slick and well-groomed man whose confidence seemed to border on arrogance. I could see the faint glimmer of triumph in Mia's eyes as she whispered something to her lawyer, who nodded in agreement. The judge cleared his throat, signaling the start of the proceedings. "We are here to settle the matter of the estate of James Lawson. Ms. Lawson, you have the floor." Mia stood, her voice steady but laced with underlying hostility. "Your Honor, I believe that the current distribution of the estate is not only unfair, but also in direct contradiction to my father's intentions. I'm here to prove that the will was manipulated and that my rights as his daughter are being overlooked." The courtroom erupted in a hushed murmur as Mia's lawyer began to present her case. I could see the determination in her eyes, but also the cracks in her carefully constructed facade. It was clear that she had underestimated the depth of the evidence against her. As Mia's arguments faltered, I couldn't help but feel a mix of vindication and sorrow. Despite the tension, there was a strange sense of relief in seeing the truth finally come to light. Then it was my turn to speak. With Lily nestled in my arms, I approached the witness stand. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on me, but I reminded myself why I was there. This was about more than just legalities. It was about honoring James's memory and securing Lily's future. I took the oath and began recounting the events that had unfolded after James's death. I spoke of Mia's absence during James's illness, her sudden reappearance with demands, and the discovery of her neglectful behavior towards Lily. Each detail was carefully chosen to paint a picture of Mia's true intentions. When I finished, the judge turned to Mia's lawyer. "Do you have any questions for the witness?" The lawyer stood and approached me, his expression a mask of professionalism. "Ms. Lawson, you claim that Ms. Lawson was neglectful. Can you provide concrete evidence of her involvement, or lack thereof, in her father's care?" I met his gaze calmly. "Certainly. Mia's visits were sporadic at best, and her primary interest seemed to be the financial aspects of the estate rather than her father's well-being. Furthermore, the documentation I have provided demonstrates her lack of genuine concern." The lawyer nodded and retreated, leaving me to wait as he conferred with Mia. I noticed her casting furtive glances my way, her face a mask of anger and frustration. It was clear that the reality of her situation was sinking in. Finally, the moment arrived for the final arguments. Mia's lawyer attempted one last effort to cast doubt on the validity of the will and my claims. His arguments were skillfully crafted, but lacked the authenticity that was crucial in a case like this. In contrast, my lawyer's final argument was a straightforward presentation of facts and heartfelt testimony about James's true intentions and Mia's failure to uphold them. It was clear to everyone present where the moral high ground lay. As the gavel came down, signaling the end of the proceedings, a profound silence filled the courtroom. The judge's voice broke through the quiet. "The court finds in favor of the respondent. The will is deemed valid, and custody of Lily is awarded to her rightful guardian." The verdict was a victory, but it came with a heavy cost. As Mia was escorted out, her face twisted in a grimace of defeat, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness for what could have been. Despite everything, she was still James's daughter, and her loss was a poignant reminder of the personal costs of such battles. Ryan, who had been a steady presence throughout the trial, approached me with a look of relief. "Olivia, you did it. You stood up for what was right." I managed a tired smile, looking down at Lily, who had fallen asleep in my arms. "I had to, for her sake. For James's sake." Ryan nodded, his expression filled with gratitude. "I can't thank you enough. Lily's future is secure now, and that's what matters most." As we walked out of the courtroom, I felt a strange sense of closure. The battles and struggles had been immense, but in the end, justice had prevailed. I held Lily closer, feeling her warmth and realizing that this was what it had all been for. A future where she could grow up surrounded by love and security. In the midst of the chaos and conflict, I had found a sense of purpose and strength I never knew I possessed. It was a journey marked by betrayal and challenges, but it had also been one of profound personal growth and empowerment. As I looked ahead, I knew that despite the trials, a new chapter awaited, one filled with hope, healing, and the promise of a brighter future for Lily and me.